Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings. Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a weekly podcast from Practical E-Commerce, hosted by entrepreneur Eric Bandholz.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all is well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet from me, Roman. Welcome.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on, Eric. Really appreciate it. I've been a longtime fan of Bear Brand, and I think we're fellow e-commerce fuel alum, and I've been watching your journey from afar, so I'm glad to finally connect.
How did you find me?
I think we both joined e-commerce fuel more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I think, don't quote me on this, I don't want to be misquoted here, but I think we were some of the first members on Ecom Fuel in the very, very early days. And we might have interacted there, somehow indirectly, and that's how I discovered you, I would say. So I followed Bear Brand, and we were at the same juncture. I was launching Linear, our first brand, with $20,000 in savings. We were naive enough to try to sell luxury handbags at a fraction of the price. It was like the Warby Parker of leather bags, horrible category. I can talk about it for ages. We actually shut down that category, but anyways. And we were both in that forum I feel like e-commerce fuel for most people is therapy. It was really instrumental to the success we have now. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're doing, you're just starting your e-commerce journey, or you're halfway into it, whatever it is, I highly recommend joining that forum because Andrew has curated it really well, and there's a bunch of great people. But yeah, that's how I found you, Eric, back in those days when you were just about to, I think you just launched. You were definitely way ahead of where we were. You already had sales. We had no sales. I joined Ecom Fuel before our first Indiegogo campaign. And yeah, I've been watching your journey from afar.
Back when you could get an ECF without any sales, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
That was a long time ago. Since then, you have completely bolted up, I would say, in terms of the way you've grown and what you're doing and all the things that you're doing to an incomprehensible level for me. Why don't you give our listeners a really quick rundown of the things that you're working on and what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, I can give a quick intro of myself. So I'm the founder and president of a D2C holdco called Peak 21. So that's PEAK21.io. We buy and grow direct-to-consumer companies. In some cases, we sell them. We sold one last year. And we do all things D2C. I've been in D2C myself for the past 10 years. So I started my first D2C company called Linear, where we sold bags, as I just mentioned. And now we sell predominantly jewelry. In 2013, Q4, I launched it on Indiegogo. And it was a classic Shopify story. My wife and I took turns working a job. By 2016, we were doing enough revenue, a couple $1 million run rate, I would say, or maybe 5 million. I can't remember exactly. Plus, and it was big enough for both of us to quit our jobs to work on it full time. By 2017, Linear was producing $1 million of EBITDA. And at that time, we've done millions of dollars on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So we built up quite a bit of street cred. So a bunch of people were reaching out, asking us how we did it. So at that juncture in 2017, my wife, Jennifer, decided to fire me. She said, we need to go out and diversify. This Shopify train is leaving the station. We need more brands, and meta ads are working really well. So I took that $1 million of cash, roughly, and the street cred that we had, and took sweat equity, like 40% stakes to 60% stakes, combined with small checks in 3 other D2C companies, while they were doing less than $1 million in revenue per year. By 2019, as a group, we were doing $50 million in sales without having raised any outside funding. And then COVID happened in 2020, and we just ballooned and crossed 9 figures in sales. 2021, we had investors knocking on our door, in particular, one very persistent one called Jeffrey Yam. He's an incredible guy. The family owns Forbes Media. Sorry, they owned Forbes Media up until this year. They just sold it. My wife was on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. They had a huge event in Hong Kong. That's how we met. And he literally came to my office every single day for 14, 15 days in 2021 saying, you need to take on external capital to buy bigger companies. So we set up a blank check company, Peak 21, where they invested alongside some other investors, 8 figures of equity. And we're now using that blank check entity to go out and buy companies. So that's what we do. We like to buy brands that are doing anywhere between $5 million in annual sales to $50 million in annual sales. And as a group, we spend more than $50 million on paid. I still actively act as the CMO for all of our brands. And we have 3 core competencies that we talk about at Peak 21. One is paid acquisition. 2 is influencer marketing. We spend north of $10 million a year on influencer. And 3rd is supply chain, because we're based out of Hong Kong. We have an office in London and we have an office in New York. So if you're looking to sell your company or just want to have a conversation about selling your company, just drop me a DM on Twitter or email me. It's roman@peak21.io, and I'd love to chat.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unwind with that. First thing I want to talk about is when you went from a solo brand to acquiring brands. Was that just you, or did you have any partners in that journey? It was just you?
It was just me. So basically what happened is that we would find companies where we fundamentally believed they had product market fit already. So take one of our companies called Nutrition Kitchen. At the time, TTM revenue was maybe 1.5 million when I met the founder, Josh. Incredible founder. He knew his customer really well. The numbers were flat for 5 years or 4 years straight. And Nutrition Kitchen does what Factor does in the US, but just in Asia, and Hong Kong and Singapore. And I was a customer. So it was an incredible business, small, flat. But fundamentally, we saw a CAG to LTV that was incredible. And it just needed fuel to be poured on the file, meaning paid, which was our specialty. So when we got involved, we bought, now we own 60% of the company. We bought more and more over time. I think my first check was only 12%. And then I came in as an agency almost, like I came in and ran their paid. Now we run their finance function and parts of their ops function. But that's like a classic relationship. Like in the beginning, I would just take over paid, almost like a paid agency. But you show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome, right? Obviously, and I was very incentivized to run it profitably and scale it as quickly as humanly possible because I had written them a check. So to answer your question, it was just me and my deputy, who's now my head of growth, running all of the paid for these 4 brands.
Okay, so you had 4 brands. Walk me through, how did you find these early brands? In the early days, and what did those conversations look like, and how do you convince them to part with 12% of the business? I assume in Nutrition Kitchen situation, he had 100% of the business. So
so Nutrition Kitchen, we own 60% now, and the original founder owns 40%, roughly, give and take. And he actually bought more of the company. There were a bunch of other shareholders that we bought out. So we bought our way in over time. So it's a very unique situation. So let's take each company one by one. So Raycon came to me through e-commerce fuel. So that's the first deal. I've written about it on my Twitter. So if you find my Twitter, my most viral thread has been the Raycon story, because we took it from $100 a day on Shopify to $100 million run rate in less than 3 years. So it's kind of my claim to fame. And obviously, it made up a lion's share of our revenue going into 2020, just because the company grew so quickly in the 32 million to 72 million, I think, roughly, pretty rapidly. So Ray DM'd me on e-commerce fuel because he's so linear. And he said, I'm going to launch a leather shoe business. So I said, like, dude, please don't. This is a horrible business. Do not launch it. Launch anything else. So we got on the call. I told him not to launch it. He launched it anyways, because I think that's what we founders do. It didn't work out. And then he was smart enough to launch Raycon with RayJ. And his father had been in consumer electronics for 20 or 25 years. So the family had deep roots in consumer electronics. He had an unfair advantage when it came to supply chain. He had people in Shenzhen already. He really knew the category. So he launched Raycon. And they were 6 months into the journey and they hadn't produced any meaningful sales. They were trying to sell this e-bike online for $2,000. They were making the same mistake I made with Linear, where I was selling something at way too high of an SRP. And I came in and kind of shut down the whole catalog and just focused on AirBuds. But that's how the deal came to me, was through e-commerce fuel. The second deal was Alpha Paw, I believe. It was through Ramon. Our mutual friend was Sam Parr, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners know from My First Million. Ramon was an investor in The Hustle. We were both advisors or on the board of The Hustle, up until it sold to HubSpot. That's how we got to know each other. He had just bought this listing called Sausage Dog Central, basically selling a ramp to Dactions. So his story is quite publicly known. And he saw what I was doing at Raycon. He met me in the San Francisco office back when Sam and The Hustle was in San Francisco. And we kind of connected and I got involved then when the company was just about to hit $1 million a year in revenue. And it was just perfect timing. We were able to scale it pretty rapidly after that. The third company, I think it was in that sequence, Nutrition Kitchen came to me because I was a client. I was a customer of Josh. I was literally buying the product and I was a client of his personal training gym here in Hong Kong. And, he walked up to me in the gym because he had heard about Linear and he was saying, can you look at my ads? Can you look at my ad accounts? So that's how I got these 3 first deals. I have a tendency to only talk about the successes, obviously, just to keep the brevity of the story short. But I also had like 3, 4 other companies that I tried this thing out with, like being an agency, writing small checks where it just didn't work out. Either I didn't get along with the founder, I have a policy where I never work with assholes, or 2, the product market fit didn't merit my involvement. And I felt like I would dilute the founder for such a small business that the incentives wouldn't align. So I would just sell the shares back at no markup to the founder. So, those are the 3 that actually worked out. I probably have a graveyard of another 3 or 4 where I tried and failed.
Yeah, so let's walk into that because I want to hear from you as someone who's got your hands on actually running and scaling multiple businesses. What are the checklists of an ideal good business? Like obviously not handbags, not leather shoes. What kind of products, kind of check those boxes of businesses you'd want to build on ecom?
I think one big disclosure I want to make before I answer your question is that, I had it very easy, right? Like you think about, I think founders don't talk about luck and market timing enough. There is no way in hell, no fucking way, excuse my English, that I could have started Linear in 2024 with that amount of traction in that horrendous of a category with $20,000 in savings. It would just not work. The reason is because I got in early on Meta. Meta was really cheap back then, and that ARB was unbelievable. So as I was selecting companies in 2018 all the way up to 2020, my requirements and my diligence the scorecard was far lighter than it is now because Meta was cheap and going from 0 to 1 was far easier. So with Nutrition Kitchen, I knew it was a great business because the lifetime value of one customer was north of $800. It was actually $1,200 because it was all organic. And I asked myself, even if lifetime value deteriorates by 50%, will CAG of $100 make sense? And the resounding answer was yes, right? So, you just had an incredible CAG to LTV. The AOV was, $150 or $200. Don't quote me on this, but I was just like, okay, I can make this work. Raycon, I just saw Ray being this insane founder. He's very humble, insanely hardworking, and very, very intelligent. I'm his number one cheerleader. I'm always the one kind of bragging on his behalf. But he's like, I just saw this insane founder combined with this insane supply chain, and supply chain had been um, pestering me with the bags. And I just saw this. I saw earbuds because I had looked at that category for 3 years at the Consumer Electronics Fair here in New York, in Hong Kong, and I knew that it was going to boom. And at the time, the iPhone removed their jack, right? Like the audio jack. So I just knew there was inflection points from having been in DTC for 4 years, which is like, okay, this is it. This is when you go hard on this category. I just knew that Ray, with his diligence and his father, could scale into crazy revenues, which personally I wouldn't be able to do because I didn't have the relationships and, frankly speaking, the experience the two of them had in the category, consumer electronics. With Alpha Paul and Ramon had an exit already, $9 million. Again, relentless founder. The common trait is that the founders are amazing. So I chose the people I work with. All three, Josh, also at Nutrition Kitchen, just incredible people that you want to hang out with. And, if they were my neighbor, I would be insanely happy. I would want to hang out with them every day. So that's criteria number one. Number two is just like the businesses made a lot of sense. So now that we go out and buy businesses, it's gotten a lot more sophisticated. It's changed, Eric. Sorry for the very long-winded answer. I just want to give full context. You have to have incredible product market fit to do that 0 to 1 with very low budgets. And I have the privilege of talking to hundreds of business. My M&A team talks to 100 plus businesses every month. So I have the privilege of seeing what those businesses are. And that pool is shrinking, right? Like compared to 2014, I would say 10 out of 100 businesses now have this like product market fit that can be bootstrapped with very low budgets. So when we look for businesses now, we want size. We want them to have had escape velocity already. But we look for the fundamentals, CAC to LTV. Does it have repeat? And is that repeat healthy? If it doesn't have repeat, does it have...
What is healthy to you?
Go ahead.
Is that like a 2X?
Triple A, like 5 stars would be 70% of people come in for second order within the first quarter.
7-0.
Ideally the first. Yeah, 7-0. That's like AAA grade. Like Nutrition Kitchen, we will have that. 70% will come back after the first order. That's creme de la creme, and that things are going to work out if you have that. 2 is that we'll look at the habit of the product. So take, for example, Nutrition Kitchen, you're getting the meals delivered every single day. So you're interacting and eating with the product, you're eating the product every single day. That daily habit versus a weekly habit or a monthly habit really plays a big role. So on the fundamental first principle basis, are we talking about a consumable that's every day? So the big theme is a consumable. If you don't have a consumable, we'll look at really, really big CAGRs, like compounded annual growth rates of the category. Look at Raycon. It's a one-off purchase. Right now, 40% of our Shopify is actually repeat. It's pretty incredible because people lose them. We've been around for 5 years. So now there's a moat. But unfortunately, the CAG now, if you want to start an earbuds brand, good luck. You have to be entrenched already, right? So we want to get into the Raycons of year one if you don't have a consumable. So we have 10 categories we're looking at right now. I don't want to share them, obviously, because I don't want competition for these 10 categories, where we're like, okay, these are going to be Raycons. So we're okay with them not having repeat. So we look for that. Then we look for contribution margins. So the way we define contribution margins is that we look at margins in 3 levels. And I hope all founders listening to this do the same thing. Actually, I'll just share a calculator after this. We can link to it in the pod so that people can download it, because I think that's going to give people the right level of rigor. So obviously, we look at net revenue. So we net out sales taxes. Then after revenue and net revenue, we remove vouchers. And we look at voucher redemption rates, which are really, really important. So for example, everyone runs a 10% off or 15% off. How many people are actually redeeming that on checkout? We find that to be a very big lever for growing the company post-acquisition. The second thing we look at is we look at shipping fee revenue. Is it added? How much is shipping fee revenue on checkout? And then we deduct cost of goods sold. And when we deduct cost of goods sold, we include inbound logistics. How much does it cost to freight it from China? Again, we have an unfair advantage because we have so much volume and we know how to book freight economically compared to most founders. So that leaves us with what we call PC1, profit contribution level number 1. Then we deduct 9 or 10 variable costs that you have to incur. They're like gravity to deliver the goods to your customer. Warehouse storage, warehouse pick and pack, shipping fees, returns, exchanges, all these things. And then you're left with PC2. This is your operating margin or the margin in the hands of the customer. Then we deduct marketing, which basically leaves you with PC3. Then you have OpEx, overhead, and then you have EBITDA. So what we look for in a brand is we want the PC2 to be 50% or higher while maintaining a disruptive and competitive SRP. So as SRP meaning suggested retail price. So let me give you an example. Raycon are half the price of Apple AirPods. That's an extremely compelling value proposition. If I were to buy Raycon now, that's a very compelling value proposition because it's a big market and the positioning is really clear from a pure price point. And the contribution margins, in this case, at scale, are north of 50%, right? So that's what I'm looking for. Do I have a compelling value, not price, compelling value proposition to my customer? And is the contribution margin north of 50%? So just to recap, we look for a consumable non-deterioration after the first order within the first quarter. If it's not a consumable, we look for insane CAGR, Raycon style, where, okay, what is the inflection point right now? Why are people buying this right now? We all know cold plunge was big a year ago or 2 years ago. Entering that at that time would have made a lot of sense. Not now, but back then. Then we look for contribution margins of more than 50%, defined by PC2. So those are the 3 things that I look for predominantly, because anyone can make money as long as you jump on the right trend at the right time, frankly speaking. And that's 90% of the game.
So your strategy is really like finding that trend and riding it, you would say. So you have to be quick. How do you stay in tune with what these trends are? Is it more of like seeing those trends from the story of the P&L, or is it more of, you're getting 100 deals coming in a month. That's an incredible amount of companies to look over. Like, how are you able to source all those companies, first of all? And how do you know if the trend is the timing of the trend?
Perfect question. To answer your first question, like how do I get all those deals? One is coming on pods like this and activating my Twitter and having an affiliate network. So we have maybe 50 what we call talent scouts. We rip this straight off Tiny Capital, where we pay $100,000 for any email intro to a founder who's looking to sell. If we're not talking to them already and we end up acquiring, we pay out $100,000 basically. So I would say the main sources are our talent scouts, my Twitter and LinkedIn activity, and my personal network. And then third is just the brand of Peak to the One being built up right now. So that's how we're getting a lot of leads. How we qualify them and ask whether or not the trend makes sense is a great question. The first qualifier is obviously looking at Google keyword search volume and how it's been trending the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and where you think it's going to go. The fundamental question you want to ask yourself is, what is the catalyst for this? So let's take an example of a category that we're never going to buy in, like, for example, cold plunge. If you're going to look at the Google keyword volume, I haven't looked at it now, but I'm sure it's still showing growth, right? Like it still shows growth, healthy growth. Now, what's the catalyst? Obviously, it's Andrew Huberman, Brian, the longevity guys on Instagram. And you want to go in there and really understand then, okay, how is this hashtag growing on Instagram? So you want to go one level deeper there and see if it's slowing down, if it's dipping, where is it on the curve? And you want to map that out very diligently. Once let's say we go into cold plunge. Now we've created conviction that cold plunge is going to continue to grow the next 3 to 4 years. Let's say we have that conviction after doing that research. What we'll do is we'll do a TAM report, total addressable market report. So we'll take all of the D2C players in the space. We'll pull out their similar web data. We'll pull out data from Shine Commerce or Particle or any of these platforms and look at their revenue by month. We know it's not accurate, but it'll get us a sense of the market. And then we'll do the same for Amazon because that's transparent. And then we'll see the sales over time. And I can see for cold plunge, for example, okay, we're selling $100 million worth on Amazon per month. I'm making up numbers. It's probably nowhere near that. And 50 million on Shopify. Okay, there's $1 billion worth sold per year or whatever the number is. And then we see the trend line over time. Is this trending down? Is this trending up? How does that correlate with the Google keywords? How does this correlate with Instagram hashtags? And how do we get a sense of the market? Once we've seen this data, you're immediately going to be able to see whether or not this is a trend that's going to last. And then what we try to do is we try to talk to 5, 6 players in the market and see which one to buy once we've formed the thesis. And right now we're doing that for 10 subcategories where we're asking ourselves, okay, if I want to play in pets, right? Like pet food is super crowded. What subsegment of pet food do I want to play with that's growing? What subsegment of pet treats do I want to play in that's growing? And you can form that opinion with a lot of the data that's publicly available.
So this strategy seems far more involved than your first strategy of just happenstance.
I would say,
which have you found more success with?
Really good question, because I paid sky high multiples for the first 3 ones, right? So it's just a lot of it was sweat equity, but the dollars felt a lot more than they do now. Right now we have 8 figures of EBITDA. It's crazy. I just did the math. This is like a humble brag, but it's more like to put things in perspective. My daily EBITDA now that I own personally, because I have co-founders everywhere, is higher than my annual salary when I graduated. It's crazy, right? So now I'm much more flushed with cash in terms of how I buy. The reason for the level of rigor is because I'm buying bigger. The last company I bought in 2021 had had last 12 months of revenue was 20 million US, EBITDA of 3 million. So I'm swinging so much bigger. I had to do my diligence. I grew to 40 million plus, more than double the run rate EBITDA, and sold it again last year. So the level of diligence going into such a big deal the amounts are just so big that I have to sharpen my pencils, I would say. And back then it was more hustle, for lack of that's the honest truth. Yeah. So
do you miss the hustle?
No, I don't. I don't at all. I really love having a big team and having people do the heavy lifting. I hate having a small team. I don't know how I did it for so long. I don't know how I ran ads for 4 brands simultaneously for 3 years without going nuts. I definitely lost my hair in the process. It was terrible. I don't want to go back to that. It was stressful. I was overworked. I hated it. So I do not miss the hustle at all. I empathize a lot with the people I talk to that come my way because I see myself in them. And they're just trying to get escape velocity, and e-commerce going through headwinds right now. So yeah, I do not miss it. What was your question again? It was how has that changed? Yeah, the size is the predominant reason for
just higher
level
risk,
of rigor.
higher stakes.
Yeah,
and
higher stakes.
You do feel like this process for you in finding companies has been fruitful, or are you still taking your L's on a bigger stage?
Yeah. I'm doing a postmortem for the last 4 months because it was only really in December I went ham and went crazy on building leads. The results have been lackluster. So we've had more than 400 conversations in the last 4 or 5 months, roughly. Serious conversations where it's okay, obviously we're talking to more than 400 companies high level by email and stuff, but 400 plus companies where we've gotten in front of the founders and actually had a proper conversation. And we've sent out maybe, don't quote me on this, maybe 25, 30 LOIs where, we're okay, this is high level good enough from initial research to dig deeper into. But I would say there's only 6 or 7 where we've really gone in deep and been serious. And I would say, if I were to give us a grade as a team at Peak 21, I would give us A plus in terms of effort and F in terms of outcome. So, blended, we're maybe at a C minus. I was just talking to our CEO and our head of M&A about this a couple of days ago, so it's very fresh for me. And I think we have three issues. One is that the seller in ecom is very sophisticated, like you, Eric, right? Like it's just someone who's young, has energy. It's not like what Cody Sanchez and Alex Hormozy and stuff talk to. Like maybe it's someone retiring and they're taking over their business. In ecom, there's so much young blood. Two, the people are really sophisticated and intelligent. So they know how to squeeze the lemon, I would say, from a buyer like myself. So that makes it very, very challenging to get a deal. We're always paying a fair price or a premium in D2C. And the third thing is most people are going through a shitstorm right now. Performance is down, EBITDA is down. Like you look at out of our six main brands, we have more brands than six, but of our six main brands, two are struggling this year, like massively, massive struggles. And blended, we're okay, we're growing because we have a portfolio, we're diversified. But if we were just sitting with these two, it would be a nightmare. It would just be horrendous. I lent out seven figures to each of these companies to get them through a shitstorm, the last 24, 36 months. So it's been hard. So I think for us, this environment, like really good companies, really good founders are just holding out and waiting till 2025, 2026 to sell. So I would say overall, it's been really, really bad. I wish I could come on this pod and say, pump my chest and say we're doing really well in terms of acquisitions, but we're not, frankly speaking. And it's a long game.
Do you feel like you're walking away from most of the deals or the sellers are?
Really good question. I would say in 7 out of 10 cases, we get deal fatigue. There's too much back and forth. And I think there is middle ground, but the deals just die out because of exhaustion.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the downsides of the thoroughness of the research is like.
Absolutely. I think we don't put our founders through so much diligence. We do mostly top-down diligence before we even put out an offer, where we were like, okay, we believe in the Bear Brand oil market because of XYZ, and we have high conviction. But where it falls apart is on interaction number 6 or 7, where there's a gap between what the seller is willing to sell for versus what we're willing to pay. What's happening is that Thrasio came into the market. All these aggregators came into the market and paid an outrageous multiple. And they did no diligence. And we all know how that ended. They ended up in bankruptcy. So they created this artificial idea of valuations and payment terms in the eyes of a lot of sellers, unfortunately. And people are still stuck on the LOIs they received from these bankrupted aggregators. And that's what we're competing with, this emotional sunk cost of this buyer that doesn't exist anymore. And there are 4 ways to buy a company, and we're really transparent about it. 1 is cash. We pay you cash from our own balance sheet. 2 is seller financing. 3 is using debt. And that debt market is dead, even for people who produce very healthy 8-figure EBITDA and have been doing it consistently for more than 5 years, like myself. Getting debt to underwrite an e-com company that right now is very, very challenging. And the 4th is equity swap. I give you equity in Peak 21 or whatever, right? Like those are the 4 ways to buy a company. And cash is really scarce right now. Like it's just like the willingness to pay a lot of cash up front, honestly, is low to non-existent among private equities and big D2Cs for an e-com company right now, given where the market is. Because people are not buying D2C companies, liquidity is not there. Often we're the only real buyer when we're talking to the company. And that's creating a lot of frustration on both ends, right?
How long do you see this trough going on for? Do you see a light at the end of the rainbow?
Really good question. It's a question I ask myself all the time, actually. It's hard. I think right now I met with everyone who lent money to Thrasio, who lent money to the people Perch. I've met with all those guys, right? and they're flush with cash, some of them. I mean, this is very Googleable. So you can look at, one of Trust's largest shareholder, I think is upper 90, and they raised 400 million before the collapse. So they're flush, right? And I haven't seen from the news cycle that they've lent out to other e-com buyers, right? So what's happening right now is that two things. One is that these people are still licking their wounds, like all the people who've lent out money. They're licking their wounds and like still recovering. Because I guess their LPs are like, how the hell did you lose billions of dollars for Trostio, right? Like you wrote off this huge investment that you sold me on and you raised 400 million against, right? Two is that the interest rates are just too high. If I'm borrowing from any of these like alternative lenders right now, like SBA loans, I think are 11%. Imagine me, I'm borrowing tens and millions of dollars to buy something large. I mean, I think I would have to pay 15%, right? Like the economics are really hard. So to answer your question, I'm wondering two things need to happen. One, people have to get over the big Trostio loss and the big Perch loss, and the market needs to be washed out of this narrative where you only lose money in e-com because, frankly speaking, these people were idiots and didn't know how to run these companies. So we need to wash out all that bad stuff. Two is interest rates probably have to come down. And I think the Fed has communicated that they're going to do 3 decreases this year, or I haven't read it carefully enough. I probably should. But like, I think once that happens, liquidity will loosen up and hopefully the market will come back. So my prediction would be Q1 2026. And if we can borrow money against an acquisition, we can still today. But if we can borrow more and there's more comfort, we can pay founders more. That's what it's going to come down to.
Where can people sell you their company? How do they reach out to you?
Peak21.io. So PEAK21.io. And you can just, or DM me on Twitter or email me. My email is on my LinkedIn. I mean, I respond to everything.
And tell him that Eric sent you, so he sends me $100,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's $100,000. Yeah. If they do, no, seriously, if they come through the pod, I'll pay you.
Okay.
We take a lot of pride in paying our talent scouts, actually. So we'll for sure pay you.
Well, I mean, don't take this as an endorsement because I've never sold a company to you, so I can't
Exactly.
endorse you. But I do admire what you've built over the years and the fact you've been an operator and on both sides of the table. So I think that in some cases is a pretty rare breed in the space. So being able to sell
Thank you.
in that environment, knowing that your business will continue on and your team can continue on and things like that, I think are important to a lot of entrepreneurs. I have enjoyed this a lot. I think we probably could have talked for another 2 or 3 hours, and I appreciate you sharing your time with me. I'll see you over on Twitter. Guys, this has been another E-Commerce Conversations. Cheers. Keep on growing.
Thank you so much, Eric. Speak soon.